Welcome to First Bite, our Detroit Lions midweek preview podcast for the first time this season. My name is Jeremy Reisman. I am the producer at prideofdetroit.com. It's got to get used to saying that. You can find me at Detroit Online on Twitter. With me, as always, for First Bite to help us break down the Lions' upcoming game, the senior editor of Pride of Detroit. You didn't get a news title quite yet, but you're working your way there. At Ryan_POD on Twitter. Ryan Matthews is here. Hi, buddy. What's going on?
Dude, I'm so glad that there's room for me in here with your head as big as it is. Awesome. Hey, it's week 1, man. We've been waiting so long for this. I'm super excited, and we have an awesome guest who knows his stuff when it comes to Philly football.
Yes, and you, the listener, may know him. He was here last year. He's a good friend of mine. He is. I assume the producer. I forgot to look up your official title, but I think it's the producer of Bleeding Green Nation. You can find him at Brandon Gowton on Twitter. It's Brandon Lee Gowton. How's it going, buddy?
Hey guys, I just made up my own title, really. Just
Can
that's what you can do. Yeah, I mean, just like anything in life, you just say it very confidently, and then people assume it to be true.
Oh, so what is it?
I call them, it doesn't matter, but I have it listed on my Twitter bio as manager and editor in chief. It sounds way more important, and actually, it really is.
I just like to change mine every 6 months so that it feels like I can continue to get promotions.
True.
Anyways, thanks for joining us, Brandon. If this is your first time joining us for a preview podcast, we always bring in a guest from the opposing team. We're going to do it a little bit of a different format this year. We're just going to kind of break down the matchup from when the Lions have the ball and from when the opponent has the ball. And we're going to start with when the Lions have the ball because to me that is the more exciting, at least from the Detroit perspective of what happens. And I want to start with the Lions offensive line versus the Eagles defensive line because I think that's the marquee matchup. And we have some news on the Lions end of things with Halapuli Vaitai going to injured reserve, a guy that you know quite well, I'm sure, Brandon. Lions are in a bit of a pickle right now in terms of who to fit into that right guard spot. And I actually want to throw this to you, Ryan, first, because Tommy Kramer, the guy that I think many assumed would be just the guy that they slipped in there, was not at practice today, dealing with an injury. So, Ryan, what do we do?
Yeah. First and foremost, do we have to issue a formal apology for jinxing the Lions offensive line? Podcast.
It's Chris's fault because I did my best to cut him off at the pass and be like, hey, we can't assume. But
yeah, but we're here, the Lions they're in this situation now where before Dan Campbell takes to the podium today, it doesn't really seem like much of issue in terms of, hey, it's going to be Tommy Kramer. Like, he's been repping there at right guard. He's looked pretty darn good in the preseason so far, albeit against, primarily second team and third string players. It seemed like a natural fit. I mean, the guy played a lot last season too, and he played a lot at right guard. So why not just go with Tommy Kramer? And then all of a sudden, Dan Campbell's like, we might move Frank Ragnow to right guard. We might move Penei Sewell to right guard and start Matt Nelson. And I said, Dan Campbell, I'm calling your BS right now. This is called competitive advantage. This is you trying to just game the system right now, because I truly think that he's just throwing stuff out there to totally just play the sound bites. Like, I don't think that they're throwing things at the wall. I think the plan is Tommy Kramer. If he can't go, I think it's Logan Stenberg. I really do.
Yeah.
And I mean, the reason I think that is just because Stenberg has looked good this preseason. Now, the problem is that he hasn't played right guard since preseason of last year,
right,
against the Indianapolis Colts. But with that being said, I don't think that you move Penei Sewell again. I think that's the least likely of all scenarios. The Frank Ragnow thing at least got me to think. It got me to think, right, Jeremy? Like, does it make sense to move him and move Evan Brown over to center?
Well, it depends on what your goal is, because if your goal is to get the best 5 guys out there, I think the answer is yes.
That's probably it, right? Yeah.
And it's tough because you don't want to remove your best player from his best position, right? Like, that's what you'd be doing with moving Frank Ragnow to right guard. And listen, I didn't see them do any of that in the 15 minutes of practice we got to watch. I did see some Penei Sewell in at guard. And I think, and this is where we'll bring Brandon in the discussion, because I feel like the rationale for maybe throwing Sewell in the middle is that the Eagles have a couple of guys right there in the middle that have to kind of be handled.
They have a very large man in the middle that needs to be handled. His name is Jordan Davis. He is the little Lions angle here. He's the second most athletic prospect according to relative athletic score, only behind Calvin Johnson once upon a time. So yeah, he's kind of a freak in nature. Their defensive line and really the offensive line too. I mean, the Eagles won a Super Bowl a few years ago by that. Like they built their team, believes building in the trenches, very important. So I would say their offensive line probably better than their defensive line, but I mean, you still have Fletcher Cox back there. Javon Hargrave was limited today in practice. He's been missing some time with a toe injury, but I'm guessing he's going to play. He was really hot for the team early last season. And then obviously they signed Hassan Reddick. So there's a lot of edge rushing talent here. Brandon Graham, a Michigan alum, was looking really good in training camp, which is crazy to say coming off an Achilles injury, and he's 34 years old. But for a team that did finish like towards the bottom of the league in sacks last year, I still think it's a good defensive line. I expect it to be better than it was last year.
Well, let's talk about them a little bit because pass rush is what it is, and I think maybe that's where the Lions can neutralize the best. They got some good pass protectors, but how are they in terms of defending the run? Because I think that's what the Lions are really going to try to do this year, and obviously without Vitae, that kind of complicates things. So how well equipped are guys like Hargraves and obviously Fletcher Cox is pretty darn good at it, and so how well equipped do you think they are at stopping the run, and maybe how good have they been at doing that in the preseason?
Yeah, I think they're pretty stout there. I think that's something we saw throughout joint training camp practices too, against the Eagles practice against the Browns, who obviously have some prolific runners in Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb, and then the Dolphins as well. The defense did struggle a bit more in Miami against the pass, but against the run, they were shutting things down on a regular basis there. So I feel pretty confident about their ability. Again, it'll be interesting to see. We don't exactly know what Jonathan's defense is going to look like in year two, with this idea that he has more talent now to work with, and maybe he can kind of do some different things, different looks. You have Jordan Davis. He's just such a unique player who in theory is going to draw extra blockers on him. There were times in the preseason where you would see him getting like triple teamed, or if he wasn't just like straight up pushing people back. So he's certainly an intriguing guy to keep an eye on there. But even the linebackers too, I mean, who are flowing behind them, like TJ Edwards, who really kind of was elevated last year in Detroit. Like that's when he kind of started to take a ton of snaps and earn a starting role there last year. He's really solid, and Kaiser White's had a really good training camp. So if you include those guys in too, I feel confident about the run defense.
And we already talked about Vitae, being out, and this seems like it might be the game of familiar faces in different places. So let's talk a little bit about the Lions wide receivers versus the Eagles defensive backs. Darius Slay still in Philadelphia. Seemed like he played pretty darn good last season. Seemed like a player that maybe Matt Patricia shouldn't have got rid of. But that all to the side, how good of a duo, Brandon, do the Eagles have when it comes to cornerbacks in Slay and the recently acquired James Bradberry?
Yeah, absolutely. Slay, I think, he still is what he is. He's a really good top cornerback. I feel like he thinks he's disrespected. I'm sure that's not a surprise to you guys. He's pretty vocal about it. He just named a team captain. I don't know if you guys saw that either, which was kind of interesting. Yeah, players voted on him, which is kind of funny, he's more you don't think of him as like a captain kind of player in terms of just, like he's joking around all the time. Right. But players here clearly respect him. I thought he looked really good in training camp. There were times where AJ Brown had his number, but it's AJ Brown, so that's going to happen. James Bradberry also really good in training camp, and honestly probably did a better job on AJ Brown than Slay did. I think in theory Slay is better, with maybe some of the smaller or the faster guys, whereas Bradberry does better against size. So I think that was kind of a matchup specific thing. But both of those guys are really good. And then don't sleep on Avonte Maddox in the slot either. He's coming off a pretty decent year there. I'm not going to say he's like a top 5 slot, but maybe like top 10. He's a quality player. He's definitely above average. So corners are good. Safety position is a little bit dicier. There's some more question marks there, but I feel good about the corners too.
Well, let's talk about Gardner Johnson, the guy also another recent addition. I know there's been talk about him maybe in the slot, maybe him at safety. Do you have an indication of where he's expected to play?
Yeah, he'll be a safety for this team, in part just because the Eagles released Anthony Harris, who is really strange because They liked him a lot, seemingly. They brought him in from Minnesota last year, reuniting him with Jonathan Gannon, where they both were together on the Vikings. And then Harris comes in on a $5 million deal, plays like okay. The Eagles signed him for half that this year, 1 year, 2.5 million. He's like leading the team huddle in preseason games leading up to the season, and then they just cut him and they brought him back on the practice squad briefly, but he just left again earlier this week. So he's gone. And Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who's played something like 80 snaps in his career at safety, is like the new guy. I don't know exactly how that transition is going to look like from the standpoint of, I don't even know if he's going to play. Like, I don't know what his snap count is going to look like in this first game. He just joined the team like a week ago, so I can't imagine he's playing like 100% of the snaps. Marcus Epps is the free safety here. He'll be playing the entire game. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's going to play. Again, I don't know how much. I don't know how effective you can be coming in. He does make plays on the ball. He's a reputation of that, but it's a big question mark.
Well, I want to know who's going to cover TJ Hawkinson, because you bring up Avonte Maddox, and he's a guy who's working out of the slot for Philadelphia at the time being right now, but he's much smaller, 5'9", 180, not a big guy. So do the Eagles have like a matchup guy for tight ends, or are they going to primarily maybe move somebody from the second line, the linebackers, to maybe guard TJ Hawkinson?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think Kaiser White's probably a strong contender there. He's a guy who has a reputation for being, he's very athletic, and he's a reputation in coverage as opposed to being, more of like a run stopper. He actually played on a quite atrocious Chargers run defense last year.
Yeah, West Virginia, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think probably we could see him there.
Well, I kind of want to flip things around a little bit because, we're talking a lot about the Eagles defenders here. I'm curious as to your outlook on the Lions wide receiving core, just the receiving core, if you want to throw the tight ends and running backs in there. Is there someone on the Lions core that you think the Eagles might be ill-equipped to defend?
That's a good question. I mean, if Jameson Williams was here, I would say so. I'm bummed he's not, because I really liked him. I wanted the Eagles to draft him. I wanted to get a look at him in the NFL. I'm really excited, obviously, for you guys when he does return, because I think he's a tremendous player. I like an Amon-Ra St. Brown. I can't say I'd be lying if I said I've seen a ton of him, but like from what limited Lions action I did see last year and some of the good things, I'm intrigued by him, certainly. DJ Chark is such an interesting player in that like there's tools there. You can see why there's an appeal, but like the success was a while ago now, and it's interesting because he was on the Eagles' radar, but obviously they didn't get it done. He picked Detroit, or they passed over on him. But yeah, I mean, those are the two guys, obviously, I think that are the most worrisome. But with the Eagles, and this is a very rare thing. This is not like a thing that Eagles fans have had the luxury of saying like ever or in a long time. I feel good about the cornerbacks and how they can stack up against them.
So I guess the last question that we have to ask about the Eagles defense is, how improved is it from a year ago? Because last year, not good. This year, maybe ? Like where are the biggest question marks for the Eagles? Is it their defensive front? Is it at the second level? Is it their defensive backfield? It seems like from all indications, like they have a lot of cool pieces in the defensive backfield, but where's the biggest question mark on this Eagles defense for them to take a step from last year?
I think it's really the defensive coordinator. I mean, the way I'm going to frame this is like Jonathan Gannon should not be back on the Eagles in 2023, because either he does a great job of this defense, and somehow he was getting coaching interviews last year. I don't know how that, or earlier this year. I don't know how that was happening. But either that, like he does really good and that heats up again and he gets hired away, or he underachieves again and he should absolutely be gone. Last year, the Eagles finished 25th in defensive DVOA. I know the roster wasn't like amazing, and they needed to add a lot of talent to it, but I don't think anyone can argue strongly like that he maximized the talent that he had. I'm not asking them to be a top 5 unit, but they could have been, closer to average last year. And they also could have not allowed 5 quarterbacks to complete over 80% or more of their passes against him. So I think there's a lot of pressure on Gannon, especially after you add all this talent. Like, it's clearly on him. Like, if the defense underperforms, it's not like, oh, the talent's not good enough. No, like the talent is there. The defensive coordinator just might not be good. So really the big question is him. And specifically when it comes to good quarterbacks too, like the Eagles were able to kind of they beat like Garrett Gilbert and Jake Fromm and Jared Goff
Jared
last
Goff,
year.
yeah.
I'll throw him
Wait a
in there.
second.
But the good ones, like any kind of quarterback with a pulse, like Derek Carr, Tom Brady's obviously pretty good, Herbert, so good quarterbacks too, but like destroyed by them. So we need to not see that this year.
So Brandon Lee Gowton already calling for a coach to be fired before week 1 even starts.